topic that I'll be covering is Airbnbs in New York City. So you may be wondering why Airbnbs in New York City. Well, throughout the course of the pandemic, I was really intrigued by Airbnb since it was such an up and coming business venture. It even stayed working throughout the pandemic by updating their rules and regulation and their sanitation. And the one pressing point that I found really interesting is that you can do it too. Anyone can become a host. You can host your spare bedroom, your apartment, your extra house, and anyone can do it. And the reason I chose New York City was it's one of the most popular places to visit and it's located relatively close to Rutgers. So hopefully you're able to find some information about maybe potentially your next vacation or getaway, or maybe you can become a host. So the data set that I'm working with here is Insider Airbnb, and some of the variables that I used are neighborhood, number of records, number of reviews, the room type, the review rating scores, how long they've been a host, price, longitude, latitude, zip code, number of beds, the host ID. And the dataset specifications are that there's 30,479 data points for host, reviews, records, and price, 22,156 for the ratings, 30,345 zip codes, 30,394 beds. So some of the questions that I'm trying to answer by exploring this data set are finding out where the most popular neighborhoods are in New York City and if these are correlated to the most tourist attractions that are found, which neighborhoods are able to host the most amount of people, do these places have the most number of beds, and i.e. this will point to where the largest friends and family gatherings can occur. Also trying to find out what neighborhood is the most convenient place to stay or which is the cheapest place to stay, as budget is a factor, especially when planning group activities. Also, what types of housing do they provide within a booming city like New York? Is it really limited to just rooms, apartments, which kind of can be correlated to hotel rooms, or do they have unique places to stay that kind of tailor to a really special getaway or vacation? Also, looking at it from a host perspective, you might wonder, is creating a property in a densely populated neighborhood worth it? Especially when our Airbnbs are already accessible, if they are or if they're not. Also, when becoming host, you want to consider where the highest profit margin is and what neighborhoods potentially might need more Airbnbs to meet the supply and demand. So the first step in exploration is the New York City neighborhoods. In this data set, we will be covering 5: Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and Staten Island. So to our left, you'll see the Airbnb listings in New York City neighborhoods with the neighborhoods here, and then the number of records on our axis here. So you see here Manhattan has the greatest number of records as well as the highest average price of $198.47. Brooklyn has the second highest number of records. However, its average price is actually the median of all 5 neighborhoods with $129.50. Over here, you'll see that Staten Island has the lowest number of records, however, the second highest average price of $163.46. So this kind of shows the potential of maybe becoming a host in Staten Island, increasing the number of records while having a relatively high profit margin. However, this doesn't ignore the fact that Manhattan, despite having a numerous number of records, still holding the highest average price, which does indicate to become a potential host in Manhattan is relatively profitable. However, to delve deeper, we need to look into the reviews of each neighborhood, as reviews kind of gauge where guests will likely stay, because they will be looking at host reviews as well as the reviews of the property that's being listed to kind of indicate where they should plan and stay at their next vacation. So over here we see that Manhattan has the highest number of reviews with 200,522, and Brooklyn coming in second with 135,432, which does show that these are the highest reviewed places to stay. And now delving deeper, we see that the number of beds in each neighborhood. So we see here Manhattan having the highest number of beds with 24,000, and Brooklyn coming in second with 18,135. So overall, you see that Manhattan is the neighborhood where you're able to host the most number of people. So now kind of battling it out between Brooklyn and Manhattan even further. Manhattan is in the light pink. All these zip codes kind of indicate the different regions that Airbnbs have been reviewed, and you see that it's kind of covering the entire area. While over here in Brooklyn, the area is kind of sporadically spread out with the number of reviews and kind of densely populated, relatively close to the Manhattan region, which might kind of show that people might want to commute over to Manhattan where there are more tourist attractions. So, overall, from the data presented so far, I realized that Manhattan is the neighborhood where most people stay. There are the most number of Airbnbs, and they are the most highly rated, and they have the most places, number of beds, i.e., where the largest family and friends gatherings can occur. So, kind of delving deeper into Manhattan now, we'll be looking at the property and the average price. And here we'll filter the neighborhood to Manhattan only, and we see that the average price ranges from 50 to 437.35. And contrary to popular belief, there's actually various types of properties listed within Manhattan. You see bed and breakfast, a dorm room, tree house, a hut, a castle, cabin, villa, boat, house, loft, and others. So you do see that there's various types of housing which kind of cater to very unique getaways and vacations that you can plan. Now you might be wondering as a host, oh, there's really interesting properties out there. However, what if I can only rent out a private room or a shared room? Is this really going to affect my rating as a host? Will people not likely stay? And from here, we see that in three types of room types, entire home, private room, and shared room, they all range from 89 to 90, which does indicate a positive sign that regardless of the type of room, your rating's not really affected as a host. However, because your rating's not affected, that doesn't really mean that that's where the highest profit margin is. As you might have believed, an entire home does have a higher average price compare next being a private room and a shared room, which kind of explains the type of square footing you're allowing your guests to stay and which does correlate to the price that you can give it out at. So, looking more deeper into wanting to become a host, you may be wondering if I start to become a host now, I might not have the greatest number of reviews or any at all. Is this really going to impact my journey and business hosting an Airbnb? And contrary to popular belief, the years that you have been a host does not correlate to the number of reviews you get. For example, a host since 2008 only has 971 reviews, while a host since 2012 has 90,000 reviews, which shows that regardless of the year that you have started to become a host, your number of reviews aren't necessarily correlated. It's probably more correlated to the type of property, your reviews, the experience that your guest has staying in your home or property that really correlates to the number of reviews that you could get. Now, something that I thought was really fascinating was the host with the most Airbnbs, and this is within Manhattan. These hosts here, their ID numbers, they actually have greater than 10 properties on their highest profiting host, which is really interesting to see because we know that Manhattan is a really popular and very saturated Airbnb market already. However, these hosts have chosen to create numerous properties within the same neighborhood, which does show that there is still a high profit margin in this neighborhood, regardless of the number of Airbnbs are, which indicates that if you'd like to be a host in Manhattan, you definitely could, despite the number of Airbnbs that are already available. So overall, we see that Manhattan is the highest reviewed, the highest rated, the largest number of beds, as well as the most Airbnbs. So some questions that I'd like to leave you with are, would you get an Airbnb in New York City, and or would you become an Airbnb host in New York City? Thank you.